Hello, Internet friend. I'm David Ravel, and this is Value Side for Tuesday, October 31, Halloween. For all of our articles and podcasts, visit valueside.com. Well, today, this economy may not be what we think it is. Now there are two ways that economists measure the economy. The first you're likely familiar with, it's called the gross domestic product, or GDP, how many goods and services we produce. The second measurement, less well known, is the gross domestic income, how much we make in income from those goods and services. These two measures should always be equal. Like the cash register at a local store, the cash in the drawer should always be the same as the cash the register has rung up. That's not the case today. In the latest report, there is a $345 billion difference between these two. The most significant differential I ever remember. This differential has become so large that it's gotten the attention of the Federal Reserve. In an article entitled, "Is the Economy Growing? Well, it depends on how you measure it," unquote, the Fed tells us they're still determining what is causing this difference. Now, I certainly do not have any access to any unique data, and of course I don't have the available resources of the Federal Reserve. But I do like to read murder mysteries, so let's go at this mystery like Agatha Christie would. The scene of the crime. Like almost everything about our current economy, this began with the COVID-19 pandemic and the steps to lock down commercial activity. American politicians, from the president down to the local councilman, put in special rules to quarantine people everywhere. Their objective was to halt the spread of the COVID-19 disease. But their result was to grind the economy to a halt. In the second quarter of 2020, the economy fell further and faster than at any time in our country's history. It was a more significant fall than even the Great Depression of the 1930s. The result was absolute chaos. Many businesses were deemed to be non-essential and forced to close. And this is our first clue. These were predominantly small, privately owned shops and stores, often seen in downtowns or in shopping malls. They're the local mom-and-pop shops that people frequent on their way to work or shopping. What's unique about these establishments is that they do not keep public records. These shops usually operate under the subchapter S of the IRS tax code. Their income is reported on their personal income tax return, and that's clue number 2. In short, these small businesses are about as far away from Apple Computer or an Amazon as is possible. The suspects. There are two suspects in this case, gross domestic income and gross domestic product, GDI and GDP. While both suspects may be mistaken in their results, that's highly unlikely. It's more probable that one reports accurately that results, not guilty, while the other reports their results inaccurately, and they would be guilty. First, we'll look at the income side of the ledger, gross domestic income. Income has an auditor, the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. While the IRS could be better, it does an excellent job of catching errors in income statements. Even in the recent reports of the IRS missing some tax cheats, any error rate by the IRS is at least 80% less than the differential we're discussing between GDP and GDI. Additionally, we note that even the tiniest boutique shop reports income, likely as personal income, via subchapter S. So overall, the data flow for income is relatively complete. After all, tax revenue is a principal source of income for the federal, state, and local governments. And besides, we have the IRS performing an audit function on those taxes. Now, the other suspect in our mystery is the gross domestic product, GDP. The Bureau of Economic Analysis is the government agency that assembles the reports on both GDP and GDI. They produce the preliminary GDP report less than a month after the closing calendar quarter, while GDI reports later. It's a remarkable effort to publish GDP so shortly after the end of the quarter. From personal experience, Its reporting results that quickly is a challenging task. Now, in their primer on the National Income and Products Accounts, the BEA makes a very similar point. I quote, "A variety of data sources are used to estimate the national income and products accounts. These data sources differ in availability, in quality, in coverage, and in underlying definitions. Consequently, the timing of the release of these estimates and subsequent revisions is based on the availability of the source data," quote unquote. Of course, data is often unavailable, or if it is available, it is preliminary and will need to be revised later. As we've noted, this is more often the case with goods and services than with income. Now, from a strictly operational perspective, it is only possible to account for some products and services produced. In its place, the BEA has sophisticated computer models with reams of historic data combined with current updates to help them make the most accurate estimate of GDP. But to meet the pressing need to publish results on time requires this estimation. Now we come back to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm speculating, but the models went off track during that lockdown. When the BEA projects the number of small business operating in the country, they have to be more accurate. When these tiny shops were required to close, for many it was a permanent condition. They never reopened. And that would explain why GDP, product, is currently $345 billion greater than GDI, income. Unfortunately, there's a bureaucratic bungle regarding the Gross Domestic Income Report. The BEA publishes product, GDP, first, within a month, as we've said, at the quarter's end. Income, however, reports a few months later. The current release date is still to be added to the BEA calendar. So it's very likely that the GDP report of last week, which showed economic growth of 4.9%, is much higher than what income will reveal when it's reported. Gross domestic income is currently running only about 1/3 of gross domestic product. So that economic growth, quote unquote, that Wall Street is currently celebrating and upon which the Federal Reserve may use to tighten monetary conditions may, in income terms, be dramatically overstated. But it will be some time until the BEA releases that data on gross domestic income. And that's the value side for Tuesday, October 31st, Halloween. For all of our articles and podcasts, visit valueside.com. I'm David Revelle. ValueSide is independently written and researched. The views expressed are strictly my own.